like, okay, so I'm in pursuit of the good life. Guess what I discovered? I discovered how to start selling things. And as soon as I started discovering how to sell things, it started closing gaps. And then all of a sudden, the good life became a reality. And this is where people get stuck. Welcome to another Rags Riches Secrets. What we're going to cover today is pray for financial miracles. Now, you might say, Mike, why are we going to talk about this particular one? Part of it is because there is actually power here that most people are making a mistake and they're missing it. If you ever read the book, The Secret, and I highly encourage you to take and to read that book. For years and years and years, highly successful people have understood The Secret. But what it is they've used it, they've implemented it, but most people don't actually understand it. And I want to show you like very specific examples of how it created a turning point in my life. And as you listen to my story, take and think about your own story. What is it? What are some turning points in your life where all of a sudden the good life was actually fashioned for you or created for you or something cool came about? Okay, so to start off, one of my backstories is when I was working at Raytheon Missile Systems, I was down there in Tucson, Arizona. And at the time I was making like $72,000 or $77,000, somewhere right in there, okay? And that was a few years ago. I think I left in 2015. So it was a few years ago. But I remember one time my wife was like talking to me. She goes, Mike, I got the impression that we need to relocate to Utah. And I'm like, you got the impression we need to relocate to Utah? She goes, yeah, I feel like we need to relocate to Utah. It's time for us to go back home. And I'm like, okay, thinking, all right, I guess we'll kind of figure this thing out. And I remember applying for jobs, and for some reason, I just couldn't find a job opportunity here in Utah. And where I live is nowhere near a defense contractor's. Defense contractors probably be 2 to 4 hours a day round trip to and from work. And I remember, okay, if the big impression we're supposed to get is to figure out how to move to Utah, then for some reason, some way or path forward should be created, right? And I remember there was one thing that she was doing that during that particular time I found it fascinating. She was watching a TV show about building these dream homes and stuff, and they're building them, and then whoever won the show actually received the gift of this dream home. And at the time, they were building this rockin' house out in Heber, Utah. And she was like, oh, I want that house. And she literally just started praying for this house, praying for it. And figuring out how to make it happen. You wouldn't see up front that any seeds were being sown that would create this tremendous lifestyle, right? I'm enthusiastic about it, but at the time I wasn't really quite appreciating it because a lot of us get wishful thinking, okay? And I remember she was praying for it. And she literally said to me, one time, Mike, it's time for us to move to Utah. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not finding an opportunity. I'm not finding jobs and things are not quite working out. And she came to me one day and she goes, we are gonna miss out on big blessings if we do not get to Utah. She goes, we're going to Utah and I'm going with or without you. And I was like, whoa, right? Crazy turning point in my life. And I said, okay, so if we're supposed to go to Utah, jokingly, I said, hun, why don't we do this? It was nighttime and we were getting ready to go to bed. And I jokingly said to her, I'm like, hun, why don't you go ahead and pray about this house and tell me what this house looks like? And I said this off the cuff, kind of joking. And I remember that she got down on her knees and she started praying. And after a few minutes, she goes, Mike, I saw our house. She goes, I literally just now saw the house. And she goes, and this is what this house looks like. This house is surrounded by greenery. And it's just green everywhere. And it's just green. It's like there's trees and it's green everywhere. And this house, when I look at it, it was a single story house. For the best of my knowledge, all I can see is it's a single story based on the way this house is set up. She goes, and when I was looking at it, the front of the house had all of these pillars and columns and stuff in front of it. She goes, I've never seen a house like that, but this one had it. And so I was trying to figure out, looking at the side of it, is that siding or is it stucco? What is it? She goes, I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you what it's not. It's not siding. So I'm not sure what it is. And to the best of our conclusion, it was probably something like stucco. And I'm like, you just saw that? And she goes, yeah. She goes, I literally just saw it. So she had described it in detail. And so the very next day, After she had that impression, it was a distinct impression, she literally started looking for this house. And she started looking and looking for it, right? And since we hadn't found it, but she had that impression, like we literally made it, like kind of in that moment, almost like a decision. We literally got the house ready. We literally put our house up for sale, like literally. We got it just prepped, ready for sale. I didn't have a job in Utah. I didn't have anything in Utah other than a description of this house that my wife had seen in an impression, okay? And so that's kind of where we were at that time. And she goes, Mike, the impression I got is like, you need to take and to sell all of our stocks. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, you telling me to sell all my stocks, all the investments? Yep, that's what I'm telling you. That's the impression I got. And I said, okay, you're like, that okay? I mean, it is what it is, right? So I took and I sold all the stocks, and that put $130,000 in our checking account. So we're sitting there, and our house is getting ready, and it's going up for sale. And my wife, for the life of her, cannot find this house in Utah. She looked and looked and looked everywhere. And so she kind of got to the point where she gave up. And when she was walking away from the office, she was walking down the hallway. And as she was going down the hallway, all of a sudden she got this impression. The impression is, turn around right now and find the house. And she's like, what? So she's like, okay, that's very specific. That's a very direct command. Turned around. She literally sat down and she looked and looked and looked and looked. And she finally found this house. And when she saw it, she was like, whoa, wait a minute. And so next thing you know, on my computer pops up and it's like, she goes, hey, Mike, she goes, I just found the house. And she goes, you're not going to like it. And I'm like, what? I'm not going to like it. And so when she took and she sent this house to me, I was like, whoa, right? Because like, whoa, like, I don't know if you've ever seen my house, but my house is pretty dang legit, okay? And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, we've got to figure out how to close this gap. And so the next thing that came into my mind is like, I took and I associated two things in my mind. The impression that my wife had was very specific about this house, okay? And when I saw the house, the only thing in my mind is I do not see how we're going to close the gap so that we, on my income, are going to possess and own that particular house. And so we literally started taking action and literally started moving forward. Like, we literally listed our house. Actually, the crazy thing is, we listed our house. Our house sold on like December 24th. It was like Christmas Eve. We actually moved out of the house and we ended up moving to Utah to live with my parents. Actually, we didn't. My family did, because I was still working down in Tucson, Arizona. And so, but we literally sold the house, relocated my family to Utah while we were in the process of trying to buy this particular house. The thing about this house that was crazy is when I took and I sold all those stocks, I sold all of it, even at $130,000 down on the house, it was not enough to bring the mortgage payment down to a point that I could actually qualify under my Raytheon missile, like under Raytheon Missile Systems, my salary, okay? And as a result of that, there was one time, like as long as I've known my mom, there was only one time that my mom actually had basically $20,000 to her name. She literally had just received an inheritance. And she wanted us in Utah so bad, she goes, I will loan you the money that you need to be able to close that gap if it'll help. And we borrowed from her $17,000. So you take the 17 thing plus what we had was enough money down with interest rates the way we finally were able to get the house, okay? And after that, I was like, holy crap, I got to figure out how to pay my mom back. And I didn't know. And so I figured out, I just started leaning in and we got her paid back very quickly. And I remember the big thing in here as I pulled out is wait a minute. I've got this house now. Now I've got to figure out how to afford it. And that's what precipitated or triggered a requirement for me to learn how to start selling things, learning how to start creating. Like when I did 9 to 5, like think about it. If you do 9 to 5, let's say you're kind of at the high end of the pay scale and they're paying you $50 an hour. That's $100,000 a year. Okay. Even at $100,000 a year, that's not enough for what I needed to do. Okay, even if you're making, let's say you're making $100 an hour, that puts you at 200,000. Like that's good money, but it's not enough money. Like the good life is a little bit higher than that. Okay, so you've got to figure it out. And like the power of two things that came together, I could not see the end. I could not see how to get from A to B. All I knew is the impression we had is you're in Arizona, you need to be in Utah. Okay. You need to be in this house. Okay, that house is ridiculously overpriced for what I needed. Well, we went ahead and did it anyways. And I'm like, okay, so I'm in pursuit of the good life. Guess what I discovered? I discovered how to start selling things. And as soon as I started discovering how to sell things, it started closing gaps. And then all of a sudden, the good life became a reality. And this is where people get stuck, is they ask for things, they want things, okay? And therein lies is when you ask for something, you've got to set your mind to the point where it becomes highly aware and highly alert of things that will come to pass. But you've got to be aware that these opportunities are going to come into your life or you'll never grab them. So you ask for it. Number two is you're going to feel fear. Like you're going to feel fear. You got to do it anyways. You can say feel fear and do it anyways. You can say lean in. But whatever it is, you've got to prepare yourself to receive. So you can receive this tremendous blessing in your life. And then number three is you've got to do everything in your power to make it work. I didn't know how to get into the house. So in the end, my mom she was a sweetheart. She let us borrow $17,000. Okay. In the end, I actually didn't know how to make enough money to actually be here. So I ended up having to discover or learn how to start generating sales. Generating the sales closed the gap. Okay. Then I said, okay, how do we figure out how to start creating a better lifestyle? Okay, one of the secrets I discovered is you've got to figure out how to make your income, like you've got to automate your income. If you don't figure out how to take like your money and make your money work for you, you're going to do as Warren Buffett said, is if you don't learn how to make money work for you, you will die working for money. I have a killer friend that literally he makes good money, works 90 hours a week. He's got a rocking side-by-side. He bought one of those really cool Can-Ams, okay? He's had it for about 2 to 3 years. He hasn't driven the Can-Am enough to actually even do the very first oil change on the Can-Am. In fact, he's working so much that he never got around to buying the trailer to put the Can-Am on it so that he can take the Can-Am to a location besides just where his home address is. See what I'm talking about? And so when you run into these things, like all I can just say is if you ask for it, you've got to be prepared to do it. Like when somebody gets an Amazon store for me, you've got to get your store set up. I get it. You've got to, when we do these Amazon stores, we work with them to start buying inventory to put inside their store. But the outcome is it creates the good life. You figure out how to automate it. And so all I can say is if you ask for things, then you've got to be able to choke down the fear, figure out how to do it anyways, and then do everything in your power to lean in to make it happen. And that, my friends, is a rags to the riches secrets. That's how I wound up where I'm at. That's how I wound up doing Amazon stores. That's how I learned how to do solar. That's how I ended up starting to create the good lifestyle. That's how I got my house. That's my secret right there. Ask for it, lean in, and then do everything in your power to make it happen. That is a rags to riches secrets, and I will talk to you later.